talking about breastfeeding and lactation today, but getting your baby nutrition, no matter how you do it, is wonderful. So we're not like taking sides on this here.
Yeah.
But we are talking about nutrition for breastfeeding and sort of like foods to avoid, foods to include. So that's kind of why we're focused specifically on lactation and breastfeeding today.
And I think education is best, is usually how I phrase it. Like, I use formula in my practice. I would never, or like parents sometimes be like, oh, I did it and I'm feeling guilty. And I'm like, never feel bad for feeding your baby. But having that information so that you can feel empowered and not judged. And I will say even lactation specialists help with feeding formula. And so I have plenty of clients who don't intend to feed. And again, having that resource to be like, this is how much, and this is how we use the bottle properly, and what recommended bottles we use, and how to help with your body if you're planning not to feed. There's no judgment. We can help with that too.
I love that. Well, and I think that's a good segue into like mental health and lactation and breastfeeding, because like you're saying with the judgment component, with the like anxiety and Googling component, with the like, you know, even just this comparison of like formula or breastfeeding, how do you see lactation, breastfeeding, and just baby feeding impact a new mother's mental health?
It's that those emotional hurdles and those mental hurdles are probably some of the hardest things to go over. And I think that, you know, the again, well-meaning advice that you get from the internet, and I will say it's always really interesting because people feel like, you know, you naturally look at social media and you compare yourself or compare to friends. And I have the privilege, I guess, of looking behind the curtain, and I'll like look on Instagram and I'll see a client and I'm like, that is not what happened. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is not, or you know, they're giving advice. I'm like, that is not what we talked about. Stop saying that. Or they're plugging certain products for whatever reason, and that's fine. But, you know, it's interesting because I think we tend to be our own worst enemy, and we do compare. And I wish we had, you know, transparent conversations about this is tough, and I had to do this, and I felt this way, or I got help, and it was amazing. There are plenty of people who I work with, and, you know, they choose not to share the story of like, oh, they felt uncomfortable saying my baby had a tongue tie or a restriction, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, I work with a lot of clients who are like, I wish I would have known. I wish we would talk about it, because it does affect. And I think no matter how much you don't want to feel certain things, it is hard to avoid that if you're going on and looking, or even just friends coming over and saying, oh, well, I didn't have any issues, or I don't know what that's about. I never dealt with that. You're like, oh, why not? Is this weird that I'm dealing with it?
I'm an abject failure.
Yeah. And it's so hard. And again, having that person to like pinpoint, and there are plenty of times that I go in and yes, we talk about feeding babies, but also like, how are you doing? And it becomes a little therapy sesh, which I'm always happy to be there. I think also just as a mom myself to be like, you're fine, you're doing great. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and there's like so much that goes into it. You've just had a baby, so your body has gone through so much, and now you're sleep deprived. The baby's gonna be feeding every like 3 hours. It's a lot to adjust to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's intense. And then the hormones.
Yes. And sometimes you come out of birth and you're like, I can't sleep, but I'm really tired, and now I'm focusing on this thing. And, you know, we have hit a point where, you know, breastfeeding is a learned skill. A lot of people, the first time they're seeing it happen is when they're doing it. And so they have this idea of like, oh no, I should know what I'm doing.
It should just be instinctual, or
yeah. But we don't live in those communities where you would have seen all these babies be fed and all the different ways, and other people, you know, you have aunts and sisters and moms being like, oh, whatever, no big deal. Now it really is this, hey, we do need a little bit of practice. It's natural, but it doesn't come naturally for a lot of people at this point in our societal setup.
Yeah.
So it does really weigh on you, and it is difficult, and you have a lot of visitors now too, and that can be tough. So sometimes I'll tell people like the first week, just, you know, get the help that you need, and then kind of focus. Like, people can come and visit the baby other times. Or what can be helpful is if you have well-meaning guests, to kind of set up a list and be like, hey, we're gonna be focusing on feeding and recovering, and we're gonna be here, but if you'd like to come and like do a load of laundry or walk the dog, or that kind of stuff can be amazing. Totally. So that person feels helpful, but not intrusive.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that's great. Actually.
Hang that on that front door. Yeah. Thanks for visiting. Here's a checklist. Pick something.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's dive in a little bit more on the nutrition component. So we were talking, we were preparing a recipe that I enjoyed with both of my previous postpartum periods, and I'm looking forward to enjoying again, which are these lactation power bites. Mm-hmm. We want to know about galactagogues and whether that's just a myth. Like, are there foods that can increase supply or support breastfeeding, or is it a myth?
So it is, just like everything, not always true across the board. Usually there are some foods that we would say can be really helpful. So some of the things are that helpful to everyone are like iron-rich foods. We tend to be a little bit anemic after birth just because of the nature of it, but breast milk is made from blood. So having iron-rich foods can be really helpful. Having I know, right? Having easily digestible foods, your stomach, as you can probably attest, feels like it's in your throat at this point. So baby comes out and now your stomach's like, oh my gosh, I have room to move. But your digestion system is kind of resettling.
Happened?
Yeah. So, raw stuff, raw vegetables aren't the greatest. And like being constipated or running to the bathroom post-birth is just not a vibe that we like.
Can't get up that easily to do that. Yeah.
It's already like a 20-minute waddle process.
Don't make it harder on yourselves.
So like easily digestible foods, already cooked vegetables can feel really great. Warmth tends to feel really great. I know right now we're going through a heat wave, but people postpartum are like, those warm stews and soups can feel just really like an inside hug, really helpful. And so that can be really beneficial. Galactagogues usually are, we'll say, any food or herb that can promote lactation. And there are some that we aim towards, and there are specific reasons why. So like goat's rue and moringa, brewer's yeast, they don't work for everyone. And so I always say they're really helpful if we think about like they can support lactation, but they don't necessarily bring on more milk for every single person. At best, you're like, okay, great, it's working for you. I love a good placebo effect, and I will happily be like, no, eat the cookies, eat the power bites. They tell your partner, tell your kids that they will make more milk so they can't eat them. It's sometimes nice just to have that cookie and be like, great, I'm doing something to support my body. But it really just is about healing and recovery. If we push ourselves or we forget to eat, then your body doesn't have that energy, that nutrients to even, recover and to make milk. So
that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Are there any foods or medications or herbs or things like that that should be avoided that could either like decrease milk supply or that might be dangerous if they got into the milk for the baby?
There's very few things that we tell people to avoid. Sometimes it is about that person's medical history. So like fenugreek used to be pushed a lot, but we actually know that it kind of muddles up the thyroid, and the thyroid is really important for milk production. So if you have a thyroid issue or you're on thyroid medicine, fenugreek is the first thing you should really make sure not to have. And it is in a lot of cookies and teas and stuff. We know that some SSRIs can mess a little bit with production, but again, not every single person and not every SSRI. So it really depends. People sometimes will be like, should I avoid like spicy food? And I'm like, look, if you ate spicy food before, also you just pushed a human out of your body. Like if you wanted to eat like a steak, I'd be like, whatever, that's fine. Maybe not every single day due to those bathroom issues we talked about, but there's very few things that I'll say, hey, we don't want to eat that. We don't want to have that.
Well, and I know some moms will avoid certain foods for the sake of the baby, like onions or garlic or dairy, with concerns that it could cause gas, those kinds of things.
Sometimes I usually say I don't want to create an issue if there's not yet an issue. And a lot of babies do fine on those foods. Yes, sometimes your baby might be gassy if you like sit down and eat a whole bowl of like cauliflower, which interesting choice post-birth to begin with, but okay. But usually I'm like, oh, if you're feeling gassy and baby's feeling gassy, that makes sense. Okay, we can put the lines together and be like, yeah, that's probably that bowl of cauliflower that you ate. But usually I'm like, hey, if there's no air in the breast, so if baby is getting really gassy, there's usually something else going on. Sometimes it's with the latch, sometimes it's with what the tongue is doing, that oral function, but I'm never ever gonna tell someone not to eat something if they are feeling like they're called to. And there are a lot of really, culturally, there are a lot of foods and spices and things that people want to incorporate, and I'm like, go for it. Like, totally fine.
Cool. Hello, Luna. Hello.
Come here, baby.
Hi.
Come here.
Well, I
My
know
baby.
I used sunflower lecithin, and I believe that the reasoning, like what I was told, was that it can sort of change the nature of the fat in the breast milk so that you're less likely to get plugged ducts, and that was like a preventative measure for mastitis. Any other supplements that you generally recommend, or is it more on a like as needed basis?
As needed. Sunflower lecithin was a recommendation that we did. Again, you don't have to do it base level. Some people have fattier milk, but it's really interesting because we know that the composition of breast milk changes, and it can change due to like weather. So we know that people tend to have fattier milk in the winter as opposed to in the summer.
Whoa.
It's more hydrating in the summer because your baby doesn't drink, under 6 months, 7 months, we're not going to give water to a baby. So breast milk is hydrating, and it tends to be thinner in the summer months.
Very so interesting.
Right.
That reminds me too of how like breast milk can change color sometimes based on like what you eat.
Yes, we have all different rainbow milk. Hi. And so it is really, really interesting. But we now say, like, now the recommendation can be like choline can help with that fat distribution, so to speak, so that you don't have to. But again, there are plenty of people who are like, I've never taken a lick of sunflower lecithin and haven't had a problem. And I'm like,
and then there's
great.
people like me. Help! I have a fever.
It's not, yeah, and it's great that we have these things to be able to try.
Right. Well, and like you said, even placebo effect, like having some sense of agency or control, there's something I can do, can really help when you're in pain or suffering or just struggling.
Love a good placebo effect. That's where like some people want to consume their placenta post-birth, and some people say don't and some people say do. I'm like, it's really great for iron consumption, especially sometimes iron we want to get from natural sources as opposed to supplements because it can constipate iron.
Yeah.
So like Floridix is a liquid iron, and that can be helpful because you can kind of break up the dosage, a little bit easier to consume. But the placenta is a great naturally occurring iron source post-birth.
Awesome. Well, I just want to circle back to like put a button on one last thing. You mentioned that SSRIs could potentially slightly decrease milk production, but I thought it was important to note that like that brings that mental health component in again. And if you're struggling postpartum and you need something to like help you cope with that, that's so important to be able to prioritize making sure that you take care of your mental health.
Yes, we do not sacrifice mental health for lactation ever. And finding the right one can be helpful. Again, I wish we already had this in the system of like, hey, postpartum, you're going to see a nutritionist, you're going to see a lactation specialist, you're going to see a therapist. Lining those people up prenatally can be really helpful because again, you give birth and you're kind of in this postpartum bubble where you're like, I'm just trying to get a meal in. I'm trying to like just survive the day, and it's so hard sometimes to pick up the phone or to Yelp that therapist or
research.
Do research, right? You're not going to be doing that. So setting those people up postpartum or setting those people up prenatally can help postpartum to already have that like, oh, I just need to make that appointment, or my partner can make that appointment. My doula can remind me to make that appointment.
Here's the number on the list.
100%.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. You are a wealth of knowledge and so fun to talk to. How can people find you if they're interested in learning more about you or following you?
I have a website, loveofalittle1.com. I also do a lot of educational content on my Instagram at loveofalittle1. I just came out with a pre-recorded prenatal course. You can obviously take it and watch it when the baby is here as well, but trying to be that resource for people and making it easy now in the digital age already set up for you.
I love it.
Great.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We will see you next time here on Dancing in the Kitchen.